Hello and welcome to a conversation between emotionally assertive minds. I'm Kaylee Bishop, the show producer, and I'm thrilled to kick off our very first episode. Today we dive deep into the intricate world of emotional dynamics within relationships, exploring the synergies between emotional assertiveness and compassionate accountability. Your host today is Professor John Parr, the founder and creator of the Emotional Assertiveness model, and he's joined by Nate Regier, author and co-founder of the Compassionate Accountability Framework. Together, they'll unpack some of the most profound concepts that influence how we connect and thrive in relationships, and why abdicating responsibility for our emotions is not acceptable. So whether you're seeking to deepen your emotional insights or looking to enhance your relationships, this conversation promises valuable lessons for everyone. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to this conversation with Nate Regier, a dear friend of mine I've known for a very long time as both a friend and a colleague. Nate has developed material in the sphere of human behavior, as have I. And today we're going to have a collegiate discussion about these models. I'm going to leave Nate to introduce himself, and then I'll do a little introduction before we actually have a chat. Nate, will you say something about yourself?
Oh, John, it's great to see you. Yes, we have known each other for such a long time and learned and grown together. And it's wonderful to be connecting across the pond on this conversation. I am Nate Regier, and I'm the CEO of Next Element Consulting, and we are a global leadership development firm specializing in compassionate accountability, how we negotiate the tension of conflict and communicate more effectively so that we can connect, build thriving organizations that can withstand the stress and chaos that we're going through these days.
Thank you, Nate. And I'm John Parr, and I'm involved with a company called Emotional Assertiveness International, which I started way back in the distant past now. And my material is all about human behavior around emotions, what emotions are, why we have them, and how they impact us in terms of connecting, bonding, attachment, cooperation, and the importance in survival of the species. So that's the material that I've got, and I'm fairly convinced that the work that Nate does and that I do, they have an overlap, and that they have ways of enhancing one another. So I'm delighted to be able to talk to you, Nate, and to share models today.
Absolutely. And after reading your books, I am confident. I know there's a lot of overlap.
So Nate, would you be willing to say a little bit about compassionate accountability to start, so that the people that are watching understand where you're coming from?
Sure. Well, actually, we coined this phrase about 10 years ago, and before anyone was talking about this. And it was based on the realization that compassion without accountability gets us nowhere. We hit dead ends because we don't deal with the tough stuff. But accountability without compassion creates toxic, unsafe, boot camp style environments that nobody wants to work for. And so what is unfortunate is most humans tend to see these two as in opposition. Compassion and accountability are somehow in opposites, as if you have to pick one. You can't have both, but when the going gets tough, you have to pick one or the other. And we reject that. We don't believe that that's true. And so we have entertained the hypothesis that the two actually work together. They need to be together. And it's a tense space where there's lots of emotions and there's potential conflict. And so we have developed methods and theory to help people navigate that space so that they can build connection and get results at the same time.
Yeah. And there's again a lot of overlap between that as a value system and a belief system with where I'm coming from, Nate. So my journey started back in the 90s when I was a psychotherapist, and I noticed that I had two clusters of clients, particularly where relationship issues were involved. It seemed that one group of clients would climb into their heads and get involved with their thinking and ignore their emotions like the plague, whilst another group got entirely into their emotions and were so blocked by their emotions that they couldn't think straight. And I realized that in order to be able to solve problems, relationship problems particularly, we need to be able to link our thinking and our emotions together and use them as tools to actually problem solve. And so I started working with my clients in therapy back then, finding ways to do that, teaching them how to. And then I read kind of somewhere in the mid-90s, I read Daniel Goleman, and I liked his material, and I thought, well, this is great. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't tell people how to. And by golly, I've actually done some work on the how to. So I decided to write my master's degree thesis on what I then called applied emotional intelligence. And that's where the model came from. And I also resonate with you around the issue of the importance of being authentic and compassionate and at the same time recognizing that there are boundaries that we have in relationship, and that regarding those boundaries, respecting those boundaries, and being respectful in the way that we communicate is important. So it seems to me to be where there is a real, almost like a twin ship in the models.
Well, two things you shared I connect with and are a part of our journey also. And when you said applied emotional intelligence, one of our emphases from the very beginning of Next Element was application, application, application. And I also come from a psychotherapist background where there was a lot of theory, a lot of models, but practical application was lacking, particularly in the corporate world. And we also have a connection through personality, process communication model. And my personality is very action oriented. I really want practical action. And so I was also personally interested in that. So application is important. We share that. And then also your emotional assertiveness. So what I really like about this is this idea of not just becoming aware and understanding and owning our emotions, but taking full responsibility for our emotions and what that means in relationships. And I think we see so much that people struggle with taking responsibility and even knowing what that looks like. And what am I responsible for? Are you responsible for? It's easy to talk about it in the behavior space, but harder when it comes to emotions.
Yes, yeah, very difficult. And I've discovered from my own life experience that the hardest place to do it is in our closest relationships. It seems to me that there's a hierarchy of how difficult it is to be emotionally assertive, depending on how close you are to the other person.
Yeah, and I think that when the stakes are higher, when we care more, the emotions are stronger and deeper, and the stories we tell ourselves have so much more history. And so it does it matters a lot that we do it well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Nate, that it's also important with emotions to differentiate between emotions that are healthy and helpful, and I call these authentic expressions of emotions, and expressions of emotions that are unhealthy and damaging in relationships. I early on in the game realized that a lot of people think in terms of positive and negative emotions. And I came to the conclusion there is no such thing as a positive or a negative emotion. There's just an emotion. It's what we do with it that makes it positive or negative. So are we using the emotion in a healthy way to promote connection and bonding and attachment, or are we using it based on our old, archaic, learned behaviors where we use defense mechanisms and use our emotions in a hurtful way that hurts not only ourselves, is hurtful and harmful to our relationships?
Yes. And I really can resonate with this idea of emotions are like energy. And it's a really important source of energy. It tells us things about how we're doing, what's going on in a relationship, how we are showing up every day, and how we use that energy is so important. I remember one of the first early messages we tell our children is, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit. And in that moment, when we do it well, at least, we are validating the emotion as neither good nor bad, but it's very important to have. How we take responsibility, how we act on it, what we do with it is a whole different thing. And we talk about this in terms of separating the person from the behavior.
Yes.
And we can have emotions that are range from, angry, angry, embarrassed, all the way up to excited and anticipating, and all of them are fine. And then that doesn't change who we are as human beings. And then we still have choices around our behaviors.
Yeah. Again, there's a resonance there, because we think in terms of energy coming from, particularly from anger, which we say is we have anger to drive us towards one another, but in a problem-solving mode, not to harm one another, but to drive us together, to use energy to problem solve and to develop and create our relationships.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And we also think in terms of child development, how in families, sometimes children aren't helped to regulate their emotions.
Right.
Like telling our children it's okay to be angry, but you don't hit people is great. But at the same time, when we as parents are angry, we need to recognize our children are people too, and we don't hit our children, or we don't hit or harm other people, that we model for our children how to do this.
Yeah. And that there's scientific evidence for the power of this in adult relationships as well. Recently, I'm in the middle of a research sabbatical this year. And one of the big questions I'm looking at is the relationship between trust and conflict. And what we're seeing is a lot of trust is grounded in how we do conflict, which a lot of times has to do with how we handle those emotions. And one of the researchers I'm talking to, Rob McKenna, their new research is starting to emerge that one of the strongest drivers of trust is what he calls composure, which is emotional regulation during conflict. And I think there's a real lack of that these days. We're not seeing a lot of composure. And so these strong emotions like anger, we see them causing destruction.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I'm just starting on a new book, Nate, which is about managing our anger, and I'm thinking in terms of how the stressors of life lead to us being set to a fine trigger. It's the limbic system is already on the threshold and doesn't require very much agitation to push us into overload, where we shut down on our capacity to think clearly, and where instead we react spontaneously with outbursts.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about how do we regulate, manage our stress levels in order to have that capacity to take up the slack and not respond spontaneously in a not okay way in relationships.
Oh, yes, I see that. And social media is one of, I would say, is one of the biggest drivers of this, because all social media it is all about selling attention. And so how we get people's attention works really well when we're stoking fear, anger, anxiety, feeling less than. So those are really powerful drivers of it. They get our attention, but then also we're just on edge all the time, and right at that what you're talking about, that kind of really easily triggered at that moment, and it is a challenge.
Yeah. I confess I have real doubts about the value of social media at times. I can see how useful it is to be able to communicate at that level. The thing that I find troubling is that it seems to be giving some people permission to be rude and unpleasant and aggressive without any form of censor. There's no immediate feedback. It just feels to me that there's something not well regulated in that whole way of operating.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious what you see as some of the, I don't know if I'd call it buffers or supportive strategies and conditions for us to be able to deal with our emotions in healthy, assertive ways.
Well, I think the first thing is that we have to get in touch with what our emotions are about, and to have an understanding of why it's important to regulate our emotions, to be aware, but not just to be aware, but to manage our emotions. So those are two of the main pillars of most emotional intelligence teachings, that we need self-awareness and self-management. And then to bring into that the fact that we're not operating in a vacuum, that we're operating in a world full of other people, and that when we interface with them, they have emotions. So we need to be aware of their emotions and how they interact with us. And then the importance of relationship. And so I think that's the first step, to see how important relationship is, and how emotions and how we use them and express them facilitate or destroy, basically.
I experience this a lot. We work with leaders a lot, and this is an area where leaders are not as familiar. This whole space of being aware of my emotions and being able to regulate them and deal with them and speak about them and connect with people around them is something that it's both foreign, but also seems scary and vulnerable. And it's something, the things they say as well, if you let people see your heart, they're going to take advantage of you, or it's vulnerable and weak to do this. And one of the things that I'm starting to think about is this idea, what I call emotional motives. And that is we are always seeking an emotional state, whatever that is. If I'm feeling embarrassed, maybe I'm seeking, my motive is to feel confident. If I'm conflicted, maybe my motive is to feel coherent or included. And so I think we are always pursuing those emotional motives, whether we know we are, whether we talk about it, whether we are overt or not. Our behaviors are trying to accomplish it. And so I often tell leaders, you're pursuing emotional motives, whether you're aware of it intentional or not. And the rest of us can kind of see it, even if we don't know what's happening.
Yeah. And that again fits in with where we're thinking with the model that I propose, and that is that actually emotions come before thoughts, because emotions are stimulated by activity in the environment. It comes from our basic primitive fight-flight mechanism. That kicks in about 25 milliseconds before we've had a chance to think about what has changed in the environment. And so we need to create space to allow ourselves time to think about why I'm having this emotion, what it means, and what I need to do about it. So that's the other part of the question you asked earlier, is taking time to take a few deep breaths and to give oxygen back to the neocortex, so we can think and use our emotions in a healthy way.
John, do you distinguish between emotions and feelings?
Well, I use them in some respects, like pretty much everybody. I use the terms interchangeably, and I do have a definition of both. So for me, an emotion is one of the four basic emotions that we have as in the fight-flight mechanism, which is to be happy. And in my model, I say happiness is actually our homeostatic condition. We're designed to be happy, and that when things are going on that lead us to feel a bit challenged on our happiness, then we experience one of the other emotions, which clues us into what do we need to do about it. So that's my starting point about emotions.
Okay.
And then I see the emotion then as being experienced physiologically in the body. So I experience sensations. So for example, if I'm sad, I experience sadness here. I can feel it in this part of my body. If I'm angry, I feel my shoulders and my arms. I feel these muscles going to action. If I'm scared, I have physical sensations that tell me this is scare. And it's one of the ways that I help people to identify, well, what is the authentic emotion that you're experiencing? Where are you experiencing in your body? So for me, the term of feeling is how I recognize the trigger emotion.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. One of the things that we experience, and I'd be curious your perspective on this, is there is that initial physiological response. Then our head makes meaning out of it, interprets it,
Yes.
tells a story about it. And then after that, there's another response. And we sometimes will invite people to back up and maybe say, I'm feeling anxious. And then the story I'm telling myself about what's going on is XYZ. And the story is one of the reasons why I'm calling it this.
Yes.
Or I'm really angry. And then the story I'm telling myself is, you don't think I'm competent to do this.
Yes.
I'm curious how those interactions happen with our interpretations of what's going on, and then the emotions that we're experiencing as a consequence.
Again, it's similarities. We do it differently, but it's the same. We're looking at it from a very similar perspective, I think, Nate. We think in terms of the emotion as starting with the limbic system. So my amygdala senses something going on, sends signals out to my body, and then I experience it physiologically, and that happens really rapidly. And then it's only milliseconds. It's not long in the sense of a human life, but it's a hell of a long time in terms of how quick the brain works. Then our cortex kicks in and starts to figure out, well, what is going on, and gives us the information. And the next job is to actually sort out, what emotions am I experiencing? And of course, we talk about the 4 basic ones, but we also recognize that sometimes you feel more than one at a time. So we think in terms of it being a bit like a color chart, that you start with the basic colors, but you can mix them together and get other colors. So what we're talking about is taking time, if I've got a complex or a compound emotion, to figure out, well, what is there in there? Am I sad? Am I scared? Am I angry? Am I sad and angry, sad and scared, angry and scared? What is going on? To refine it back down to the basic 4, to get to, so what do I need to do about each one of those?
How do you explain 5 people in the same meeting, and the boss says something inappropriate, maybe something we would consider off color or prejudice or rude, and 2 of the people in the room experience strong feelings of maybe anger, embarrassment, shame, and 3 people are completely comfortable in that moment, all experience the very same behavior, having different emotions about it?
Well, it's because we all have different value systems, Nate. So because we don't all have the same perspective on, for example, what is and what is not an okay thing to say in public. If you know from your years of experience with me that my time in the Navy has left me with a very colorful language, which I would never use against anybody. So so for me, swearing is, if I call you a bad name, that's swearing. If I use a word that is called a swear word for me as a heightener or an emphasizer, it's not swearing. It's but somebody else would hear me say that word and be incensed by it, because to them it's a not okay word. So I think the problem is that when we get together in a group, yes, we're a group, yes, we may have a common objective as a team, but we may have a whole different set of different ways of seeing our objectives, and seeing what's important and seeing what's good and what's bad. And so there's a lot of value judgments involved, Nate. That's the way I would see it.
And that's where I'm still not sure how I think about which comes first, because in that situation, it seems like the emotion is actually a product of the interpretation of the value systems. It doesn't come primary, it comes secondary after the thoughts. And so after the interpretation of what happened.
So you see, what I see is that let's go to this example you mentioned. The boss says something that some people would say was inappropriate and others wouldn't
Right.
even blink at.
Right.
What I see is happening there is an external stimuli. It goes in through the senses, and it triggers an emotion. So the emotion is actually triggered by the fight flight mechanism that says, is this something that I get to eat, or is it something that gets to eat me? That's it. It's bedrock. The next thing that happens is our cortex kicks in and says, and this is my take on it. Okay, so like, I'm not afraid of dogs. Let's take an example. I've had dogs around me most of my life, usually very big dogs, and dogs don't bother me. So if I see a dog that's looking aggressive, I don't experience anxiety. I experience, now is the time to show the dog that you're the boss. So I'm quite calm about it. Somebody else might see a dog that's sitting there quite calmly and not bothering anybody and feel anxious about it because they're scared of dogs. So we have, not only what goes on in the environment, but how we perceive what goes on in the environment, our own perceptual framework, colored by then our life history and experience and a whole host of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that answer the question that you put to me?
It does. It's an interesting thing to work with people on, because once we become conscious of the stories we tell ourselves, our interpretations, the emotions can change considerably.
Yes.
As a result of the very same stimulus. So
absolutely, yeah.
I'm not sure where I stand on the primacy of the emotion, where it fits in the sequentially in things. But those initial immediate physiological reactions, if we're not in tune with those and understand what they are and able to name them, it's very difficult to get a handle on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, going back to what you've just said about where the thinking fits in, to me, with emotions, it fits in because sometimes the thinking can act as if it were an external stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I'm afraid of spiders, I can scare myself when there's no spiders around just simply by thinking about a spider.
Right.
And if I see a spider, I experience scare. It's the same fear of the same thing. One is an imaginary spider and one is a real spider. So I think that our thoughts can actually also be the triggers of our emotions.
So this gets me thinking about transference. And although this is a psychological term from therapy, it's something that I've been experiencing quite a bit with leaders I'm working with, where their responses to a present stimuli are far out of proportion to what most people would think, and they're not even aware at the time that it really is, they're responding to something from the past.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really difficult to work with, because to work with someone around transference requires a therapeutic contract most of the time.
Yeah.
The only way I think that we can deal with it in real time is to be clear that I don't own what you're putting on me, and to stay calm and to keep my boundaries in place and to respect where the other person is coming from, but to point out to them that if they see me as that, I would like to see some evidence of what supports it, what supports your belief that I am this.
Yeah. We talk, one of our models is called the 3 switches of the compassion mindset. And we talk about what choices, what kinds of choices and awarenesses do we need to have inside in order to deal with these things effectively. And we talk about 3 switches of value, capability, and responsibility, that we see ourselves and others as essentially valuable, as capable of contributing to the solution, but also as responsible for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And most adults we work with are familiar with the idea of being responsible for your behaviors, but not responsible for your thoughts and emotions.
Yes.
And so they think nothing of saying phrases like, "You really made me mad," and are completely unaware that that statement is abdicating responsibility for my own emotions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What perspective or wisdom do you have on that dynamic that we see?
Well, I find it very difficult when people use those myths about making me mad or making me think, um, on the basis that, again, I have to be aware of what the contract is in our relationship. So how does the relationship permit me to respond to that? So sometimes I hear it and recognize that's the way they perceive the world and don't do anything about it.
Mm,
Um, if the relationship permits it, I'll say, depending again on the relationship, I might say something like, "Oh wow, how did I do that?"
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it's like, how do we confront something in the context of a relationship, unless there is within the relationship contract some permissions on that kind of confrontation?
Mm. You've used the word contract a couple times. What does that mean?
Well, for me, it's the basis of all healthy relationships. So I think that we enter most of our relationships without thinking about what is the contract, either what is the social contract, but not only that, what is the objective of this relationship? What do we both want from it, and what are we willing to put in, and what do we want to take out? So I invite people who are entering a close relationship to sit down and actually figure out what is the contract, what are the agreements that we will have in this relationship. What are the things that will make and break this relationships? What are the important outcomes you want? When my wife and I first got together 22, 23 years ago now, the first thing we did when we sat down was we actually talked about, look, we recognize we're falling in love. We want to this to be a permanent relationship. What do you want to get out of this relationship?
Yeah.
And Carmen said, well, it's important to me to have a baby. Well, at that time I was getting on for 60, and I already had 3 children, already grown up children. But fortunately, I love children. So I was able to say, that's good by me. I like children. So
Yeah.
we agreed there and then. One of our objectives will be to make a family.
Mhm.
But we agreed other things too, like fidelity. Where does that fit into our relationship? And all the important things about what we would share and how we would work together. It to me it's the foundation of a healthy relationship. You wouldn't
Boy,
change.
that's
Sorry,
yeah.
Nate, carry on.
No, that's so powerful because how can we have conversations about expectations or trust or commitment or responsibility or disappointment if there's not somewhere a contract? None of those have any context until we have a contract. And if we
Absolutely, yeah.
I think maybe a lot of drama occurs because people want to talk as if a contract's been broken, but there never was
There
one,
never
or
was
it
a
was
contract in the
never
first place, yeah.
it wasn't formal, or maybe it was just one-sided. And so unspoken contracting, it seems like, or assumptions about contracting could be a real problem.
Oh well, I think it's a problem that could cause the end of relationships.
Right.
It's not a first that
Yeah.
a couple meet, fall in love, get married, are having a great time until 2 or 3 years in, one of them says, "Well, shall we start a family?" And the other says, "Oh, I don't want children," and they've never
Mhm.
ever talked about it.
Right.
It's like
Right.
you're a long time into a relationship to suddenly discover that you've got a major difference of what the objectives and needs are. How do you square that circle at that time? It's hard, isn't it? So get it sorted out at the beginning.
Yeah. When we are teaching people how to use our ORPO template, it's a formula for having compassion, accountability, conflict. What is commonly what people say is, in order to do this well, I have to deal with some stuff. And what they realize is it's not really about what anyone else is doing. It's about what needs to change inside of me to be able to do this well.
Yeah.
And then the other thing they talk about is it's how intentionality makes such a difference. Is good models, good frameworks like we use, it really invites us to be intentional about things we never realized we
Yes.
needed to be careful about.
Yeah.
And what I don't mean careful like walking on eggshells, but take care. and be overt and intentional. And when those things get taken care of, it's amazing the energy that opens up in a relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. Eric Berne talked a lot about organizations and groups, and in a way, a couple is a very small group. And he talked about the importance of having clear boundaries, and the amount of energy that is lost as a group develops, is lost to what he calls group process, which is the forming, storming, norming, and performing stuff. And we can smooth that out a lot if we have clear contracts at the beginning. And one of the things that I propose for people, again, around the issue of relationship, is a mathematical model for looking at relationships, looking at the term relationship, which to me is a mathematical term in itself. A plus B equals X plus Y is a relationship, and what makes the relationship is the equal sign. So this equals that. A plus B and X plus Y are different, and they're equal, of equal value. And so we start from there, and then we say, well, that is the ideal relationship. There are other relationships, like pretty much good enough is more or less equal. That will work. When it starts to go seriously wrong is when you've got the I am worth more than you, or you are worth more than me dynamic. And if you move into that area and stay there for long enough, you end up with there is no relationship, the equal sign with a line through it. So I find that really helpful, especially when looking at couples and working with couples. I've always found that useful to look at what is the dynamic in terms of the relationship. How does this and this turn into this? And I see relationship as a third party. So I see when two people come together, there is you and me, and then there is our relationship, and we are both responsible for maintaining and contributing to the good of that relationship.
You talk about more worthwhile, less worthwhile, and we both are familiar with the concept of okay. I'm okay, you're okay. And one of the things where we've kind of expanded that is, very often when we talk about that, it seems as if we're saying I'm worthwhile, you're worthwhile. And there's so much more to being human than that. And that's why our compassion mindset includes 3 switches. Value, which is I'm worthwhile as a human being, you are worthwhile, but also capability. I'm capable, you're capable. And so there are behaviors in the old drama triangle. Rescuing is a behavior that says I'm more capable than you.
Yes.
And so capability is also something that needs to be dealt with. But then responsibility is another one. Is I'm responsible, you're responsible, not more or less. We're both 100% responsible for our stuff, but not for other people's stuff. And we've actually created a formula. When you talked about the equal sign, we've created a formula called the Drama Resilience Index. And it's based on our assessment of how people steward the energy in that gap. And we can steward that energy in drama, or we can steward that energy in compassion to create more. And when the ratio is 1, it means that on any given day, it's a toss-up. And as the ratio goes higher over 1, it means compassion is taking the lead over drama. And so it's kind of fun to have a single number that measures the resilience of a person to be able to steward that energy in healthy ways.
I like it. So Nate, I've really enjoyed this time with you. This is such a pleasure to talk to you and to trade ideas with you. And I hope we can do this again one day.
Oh, you're so welcome. And again, I so admire the deep thinking you do, but also how you've brought your clinical expertise and background into this practical thing, because I think we need great tools for just average people out there to be able to use this without having to go to therapy. And so I think people will be surprised the kind of deep work they can do and the effectiveness they can get in their relationships with these tools.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, my friend.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey through the realms of emotional assertiveness and compassionate accountability. A special thank you to our host, Professor John Parr, and guest, Dr. Nate Regier, for sharing their invaluable insights and experiences with us today. We hope you found today's conversation as thought-provoking and transformative as we did. Remember, the strength of our relationships hinges on our willingness to understand and responsibly manage our emotions, alongside an unwavering commitment to mutual accountability. If you enjoyed this episode and wish to explore more about building stronger, healthier relationships with emotional assertiveness, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our channel. Your engagement helps us continue to bring meaningful discussions like this one to you. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook for more insights and the latest news and events as we share them. We'd love to hear your thoughts, experiences and questions on today's topics. Please leave a comment below and let's keep this crucial conversation going. Thank you and see you on the next episode.